why is it that some people work just incredibly hard, yet they never seem to escape poverty? I mean, we live in this era that absolutely worships the hustle.
Oh, yeah. The whole grind mindset,
Right. We're told from day one, if you just put your head down and work, you'll eventually make it.
which is, it's a very comforting narrative, honestly. Makes the world feel fair.
Exactly. We just assume poverty equals laziness. Or, well, if we're being generous, we say it's a lack of opportunity or capital.
Yeah, that's usually the default assumption.
And when we look at deeply poor communities, especially, in developing nations, we tend to romanticize them. We picture this beautiful, unbreakable warmth of family.
Right, the whole tight-knit village where everyone survives by helping each other through tough times.
Yeah, sharing the harvest, raising each other's kids. The quintessential it takes a village vibe.
But what if the exact opposite is true?
And this is the massive face-slapping reality check we're getting into today. Because what if the very social structure meant to save them is actually the cage keeping them trapped?
It's a huge shift in perspective.
Yep.
What if getting rich is actually dangerous?
It sounds totally counterintuitive. I mean, a bit cynical even. But we're not talking about some abstract theory today on this deep dive.
No, not at all. We have hard experimental evidence showing how people actively, deliberately destroy their own wealth just to escape their relatives.
It completely broke my brain when I started reading this research. So our mission today is to totally upend how you, the listener, think about wealth, family, and just human nature in general.
Yeah, we're unpacking this landmark field study by two economists, Powell and Jockiela and Owen Ozier. And they didn't just run like computer simulations in a lab.
Right, they went directly into the field.
Exactly. They went inside 26 rural Kenyan villages to map exactly how money moves and, honestly, more importantly, how it hides.
Because, I mean, think about it. If you suddenly made a ton of money today, what's your first reaction?
You probably invest it, right?
Yeah, put it in a high-yield account, maybe fix the roof, buy a car, you put the money to work.
That's the standard economic assumption.
Right.
Capital finds a use.
But in many parts of the world, if someone gets a windfall, their immediate, literal, panicked reaction is to hide it.
Yep, they bury it.
And the crazy part is they aren't hiding it from thieves or the government. They are hiding it from their own blood relatives.
To really understand the psychology behind this panic, we have to dismantle what economists call the illusion of mutual aid.
Okay, break that down for us.
So if you look at traditional development economics, the textbooks tell us that in poor areas, places, without formal banks or crop insurance people, they have no choice but to rely on informal mutual aid networks.
Like the original safety net.
Exactly. If my crop fails because of a drought, my neighbor shares their harvest with me.
And if their roof collapses next year, I help them rebuild it. It sounds like this beautiful, balanced ecosystem of reciprocity.
And, if you just skim the surface of the data from these 26 Kenyan villages, it actually seems to prove that comforting narrative.
Yeah, the survey data was wild. They found that a staggering 90% of the villagers had given money to others in just the past 3 months.
90%.
If you just look at that one stat, it sounds like a utopian society of selfless sharing.
It really does. Until you flip the page and look at the other side of the ledger.
Right.
Because while 90% of people were giving money out, only 41% reported actually receiving any transfers from others.
Wait, hang on. If 90% are giving but only 41% are getting, the math just doesn't add up for a balanced system.
It doesn't add up at all.
That means a huge portion of the population is just bleeding resources out into the void. They never get anything back.
Precisely. Now, maybe a tiny portion of that gap is self-reporting noise, people remembering giving more than receiving. But even accounting for that, it highlights a massive structural asymmetry.
It's totally one-sided.
Yeah, this isn't a balanced safety net. For many individuals, it is a strictly one-way extraction of resources. It's what economists actually call forced solidarity.
Forced solidarity. Ooh, that phrasing gives it a totally different vibe.
It's heavy, right?
It stops sounding like a safety net and starts sounding like a mandatory bill you have to pay the second you show any sign of success.
It is exactly like a tax. But unlike a government tax, which is, well, theoretically predictable, this tax is relentless and arbitrary.
Right.
The survey data on daily life there is incredibly revealing. In just the 3 months prior to the survey, 42% of households were explicitly asked for a gift or a loan.
Nearly half the village, just getting hit up for cash in a 90-day window.
And it gets more intense. 90% of households had to contribute to a local fundraising drive.
Wow.
In Kenya, these are called harambes. They're organized for everything from medical bills to school fees to funeral costs.
You're just constantly under the microscope.
Constantly. In a tight-knit rural village, privacy just doesn't exist. If you have money, the community knows, and they demand their share.
I want to make this tangible for you listening right now. Just imagine you buy a winning scratch-off lottery ticket. Say you win $10,000.
Okay, nice windfall.
Suddenly, you have third cousins you haven't spoken to in a decade knocking on your door asking for a handout. That's annoying, obviously, but it's a one-time event. You deal with it, it's over.
Right, you move on.
But now, imagine that happening not just when you win the lottery, but every single time your regular paycheck clears the bank.
Oh, man.
Every time you buy new shoes, every time you bring home a slightly nicer bag of groceries.
The pressure is absolute. It is a daily grinding reality.
But I have to push back a little here, because I think a lot of listeners might be feeling a bit of moral friction right now.
Sure, yeah.
Because isn't sharing inherently a good thing? Like, we're social creatures. If I have extra food and my neighbor's kids are literally starving, of course I should share. How can we call this destructive?
That is the essential philosophical question here.
Okay.
And the answer is really vital. The destructiveness doesn't come from the isolated act of sharing itself.
Okay.
It comes from the anticipation of forced sharing and how that anticipation completely warps long-term human behavior.
Walk me through that. What do you mean by anticipation?
Okay, imagine you are trying to build a better life. You want to start a small business, maybe a little kiosk selling everyday goods.
Sure.
You know that to do this, you have to work extra hours, take on risk, save your pennies. But you also know with absolute certainty that the second your kiosk shows a profit, your extended family will arrive to claim it.
I see where this is going.
If you know that any surplus you generate through your own hard work will be immediately consumed by your social network, your incentive to generate that surplus vanishes entirely.
You just stop trying to succeed.
Because what is the point?
Right. You're saying it kills the motivation at the root.
Sure.
Why work an 80-hour week if you're only going to get to keep the rewards of a 20-hour week?
Exactly. And the rest is forcibly redistributed to people who didn't take any of the risk.
That is wild.
And to prove just how destructive this mechanism is, Jaquila and Ozier knew they couldn't just rely on survey questions.
Because people lie in surveys, right? Especially about family.
Exactly. People don't always answer honestly about sensitive family dynamics. So the researchers built a laboratory of human nature right in the middle of these villages.
This experiment is honestly one of the most brilliant setups I've ever seen. Let's set the scene for the listener.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the researchers invited the adult residents of these 26 villages to gather in empty classrooms at local primary schools. They sit them down at these little wooden desks and tell them they're going to play a game with real money.
Not hypothetical money, high stakes, physical cash.
And the first thing they did was randomly assign each person an endowment, like a starting bankroll. You either got a small endowment or a large one.
Let's break down those numbers because the stakes matter tremendously here. The small endowment was 80 Kenyan shillings. The large was 180 shillings.
Now, to someone listening in London or New York, 180 shillings, which at the time was about $2.35, sounds incredibly tiny.
Yeah, you can barely buy a cup of coffee with that.
Right. But we have to put it into the context of rural Kenya.
Context is everything in economics. In these specific villages, the median monthly wage for full-time unskilled work was only about 26 US dollars.
So this 180 shilling large endowment was roughly equivalent to almost 10% of a full month salary.
Yep. Just handed to you in a single afternoon for playing a game.
That is serious, meaningful money. I mean, if you make $4,000 a month, imagine someone handing you $400 cash just for walking into a room. You are paying attention.
The stakes were definitely real enough to trigger genuine financial decision-making.
So here was the choice they had to make. Each person is handed their endowment entirely in 10 shilling coins, and they had to physically divide these coins between 2 plastic cups on their desk.
One cup was the safe savings cup.
Right, this one was simple. Any money you put in there, you get to keep, guaranteed. 0 risk, but 0 interest. You put 40 shillings in, you walk out with 40 shillings.
But the other cup was the risky business cup. This represented entrepreneurship or high-yield investment.
And the payoff on this one was crazy.
Yeah, any money you put in the risky cup had a 50% chance of being multiplied by 5. and a 50% chance of being lost entirely.
They made it incredibly visceral, too. They literally had the participants put the money in, and then a researcher would shake a 1 shilling coin in a sealed container and flip it right there.
Heads, you win 5 times your money. Tails, your investment is wiped out.
Now, let's look at this purely mathematically for a second. From a traditional economic standpoint, the expected value of the risky cup is absolutely massive.
A 5 times return on a 50-50 coin flip is an incredibly lucrative opportunity. Wall Street hedge funds would kill for those odds.
All right, let's just do the math. If I put 10 shillings in the risky cup, half the time I get 0, half the time I get 50. So the average expected outcome is 25 shillings.
Which is a 250% average return on investment.
Any rational economic actor, especially one who just got a free large endowment of 180 shillings, should be willing to invest aggressively. The potential upside is just too good to ignore. Even if you lose, it was house money anyway.
In a vacuum, yes. But human beings do not live in a vacuum. They live in a society.
And this is where the researchers added a twist, and this twist is the core engine of the entire study.
The twist of visibility. Nobody in that classroom knew who received the small 80-shilling bag and who received the large 180-shilling bag. It was completely secret.
Okay, so I'm sitting at my desk, I open my envelope, and I see 180 shillings. I look around the room at my neighbors, my cousins, my aunts. I know they might only have 80 shillings, but they don't know what I have.
Exactly. But the researchers randomly assigned people to 2 different conditions regarding how their final investment choices would be shared.
Okay.
Some participants were placed in a private treatment.
The private treatment sounds like a sigh of relief. If you were in this group, whatever you chose to invest, whatever you won or lost, was kept completely secret.
You made your choices behind a little cardboard privacy screen. The researchers recorded it quietly. You got your payout and you walked home.
No one in the village would ever know if you made a killing or lost it all.
But the other participants were assigned to the public treatment.
Oh, man.
If you were in this group, you were told in advance that at the end of the experiment, you would have to stand up in front of the entire classroom, in front of your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, and publicly announce exactly how much money you put into the risky cup and whether you won or lost.
Wow. Okay. This is the moment the trap springs shut. This creates a profound, agonizing dilemma for anyone who received the large endowment.
Let's walk through the psychology of this. Remember, everyone in the village knows the rules of the game. Everyone knows the minimum anybody received was 80 shillings.
So if I get the big bag of 180 shillings and I decide to be a rational investor, I take 100 shillings and put it in the risky business cup, hoping for that big multiplier.
Right.
But I'm in the public group. The moment I stand up and announce I invested 100 shillings, everyone in the room instantly realizes 2 very dangerous things about me.
Number 1, they instantly know you received the large endowment because you couldn't possibly invest 100 if you only got 80.
Bingo.
And number 2, they know you are currently holding a massive amount of cash, either from a winning multiplier or just from your safe cup reserves.
The spotlight is on me. The neon sign above my head is flashing. He has money. Come ask him for a loan.
Yep.
So if you get the big bag of money and you know you have to announce your actions to the room, what do? Because remember, whatever you put in the safe cup is never announced. Only the business cup investment is made public.
So if you want to pretend you only received the small poor man's endowment of 80 shillings, what is your only move?
Your only move is to ensure your public investment never, ever exceeds 80 shillings.
If you invest exactly 80 shillings or maybe 60 or 40, you can shrug your shoulders, look around the room, and play the part. You look just like everyone else who only got the small endowment.
By doing this, you effectively hide that extra 100 shillings safely in your pocket, out of sight from the hungry eyes of the community.
You are creating an alibi of poverty.
An alibi of poverty. I love that phrasing. And when we look at the data from the experiment, when wealth is exposed to the sun, the results are just a massive face-slapping reality check.
The change was drastic and honestly quite tragic to observe.
Yeah.
When women who received the large endowment were told they had to make a public announcement, their behavior completely fractured compared to the women who got to make their choices in private.
To maintain the illusion of poverty, these women purposefully invested 80 shillings or less.
The probability of them choosing an investment amount of exactly 80 shillings, which is the exact maximum they could invest while still plausibly denying they had the large endowment, jumped significantly when the spotlight was turned on them.
Let's really pause here. Let's let this sink in and think about the pure economic irrationality of this choice from a traditional textbook standpoint.
From a spreadsheet perspective, it's madness.
These women are deliberately choosing not to invest that extra money into a venture with a 500% potential return. They are leaving life-changing generational money on the table.
But from a social standpoint, it is a completely rational survival instinct.
Right. They are literally starving their own future just to pretend to be poor. They would rather guarantee they stay poor than risk succeeding and becoming a target.
This raises an incredibly important question about how we fundamentally view risk in economics.
How so?
Usually, we think people avoid risky investments because they are afraid of the downside. They are afraid of losing their hard-earned capital.
Sure, fear of failure.
But this experiment proves something entirely different is happening in these communities. They aren't just afraid of losing the investment to bad luck. They are terrified of succeeding.
Because if they succeed, the community will descend on them and take it anyway.
Exactly.
Huh.
The social safety net has mutated into a predator.
That is such a chilling phrase. The safety net mutating into a predator. And the researchers didn't stop there, did they?
No, they wanted to prove exactly how terrified these participants were of this predator. They wanted to put a literal price tag on the fear.
Which brings us to the next phase of the experiment. Let's call it the crazy trade of paying for silence. What if you could just buy your way out of the spotlight?
The researchers introduced what they called the price treatment. It was an incredibly elegant addition to the game.
Tell us how it worked.
Before they had to stand up and announce the results to the room, subjects in this specific group were pulled aside and told they could pay a random secret fee directly to the researchers. If they paid this fee, the researchers would keep their mouths shut, and the participant wouldn't have to announce their winnings publicly.
Just process that scenario for a second. You just won money in a game. It's a windfall. And now the game master leans in and whispers, "Hey, for a fee, I'll let you sneak out the back door so your neighbors don't see your pockets bulging."
And the fee wasn't fixed. It was randomly set between 10 and 60 shillings. So sometimes it was a cheap bribe, sometimes it was a massive extortion.
And the data here is shocking, absolutely mind-blowing. Among the people who could actually afford the fee from their winnings, 30% of them willingly paid it.
Almost a third of the room chose to hand their money back to the researchers just to buy silence.
And we need to emphasize that it wasn't a small nominal fee relative to their newly acquired wealth.
No. On average, the individuals who paid this bribe handed over 15% of their total gross earnings from the experiment.
15%. I'm trying to map this onto a modern Western life. Imagine you get a promotion at work. You get a nice bump in salary.
Sounds great.
And you immediately offer 15% of your total pre-tax gross paycheck to your company's HR department, just so they promise not to tell your family you got a raise.
It sounds absurd when you frame it like that.
It is an outrageous mafia-style protection racket. Like, nice paycheck you got there. Be a shame if your cousin found out about it.
But the mafia isn't a gang with guns here. It's being perpetrated by the subtle, unspoken societal norms of the village.
So what does this all mean? They are voluntarily taxing themselves, throwing away their own wealth, just to avoid the eyes of their peers.
It is the mathematical equivalent of blind panic. They're sitting at their desks, looking at their winnings, looking at the door, looking at the faces of their neighbors, and calculating that surrendering 15% of their wealth to a total stranger is fundamentally cheaper and safer than letting their community know they have money.
Which brings us to the most obvious screaming question, the question I was asking myself the entire time I was reading this paper.
Who exactly are they so afraid of?
Yes. If you are a listener sitting in a Western country right now, your immediate culturally ingrained assumption is probably, oh, it's oppressive husbands. The women are hiding the money so their patriarchal, domineering husbands don't take it.
That is the standard narrative in a lot of gender-focused development economics. But the data from this study says no. That assumption is completely factually wrong.
This blew my mind. I totally thought it would be the husband.
This is where the demographic specifics of the study are so crucial, and why fieldwork is so much better than theory. The researchers didn't just record the numbers. They tracked exactly who was sitting in the room during each experimental session.
They mapped the social network of the classroom.
And they found that the real terror, the element that caused the hiding behavior to violently spike, was not the husband. It was the presence of close blood relatives.
Blood relatives. We were talking about parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, and even grown children.
Exactly. When those specific close blood relatives were sitting in the classroom watching, the probability of a woman deliberately hiding her income spiked by nearly 42 percentage points.
That is a massive, undeniable jump, 42%.
And the husband myth. The data flat out proves that a husband's presence in the room had almost zero direct statistical impact on a woman's decision to hide her income.
The husband being there didn't scare them into hiding at all.
It's a fascinating dismantling of our Western assumptions. To further test this, the researchers isolated the data of the unmarried women in the sample.
Right. If the fear was about marital control, unmarried women shouldn't show the hiding behavior.
But those unmarried women exhibited the exact same desperate, wealth-destroying hiding behaviors when their family members were around.
The fear wasn't patriarchal marriage control. The fear was the bottomless pit of the extended family network.
The real bloodsuckers aren't the spouses, it's the bloodline itself.
But I have to ask why? Why is the blood family so much more dangerous to a woman's wealth than the in-laws or the husband? What is the cultural mechanism there?
It comes down to a really fascinating demographic and cultural quirk. In this specific part of Kenya, which revolves around patriarchal marriage.
Patriarchal. Okay.
In these ethnic groups, particularly the Luya and the Luo communities where the study was conducted, tradition dictates that when a woman marries, she leaves her home and moves to live near her husband's family.
Ah, okay. The geography of the village shifts. So she is physically surrounded by her in-laws every day, not her own parents and siblings.
Exactly. The survey data backed this up perfectly. It showed that only 12% of the women in the study lived near their own blood relatives, compared to 50% of the men.
So think about the dynamic. A woman's in-laws might demand things of her husband because he's their blood.
But her own blood kin, who live further away, have a unique, profound, almost spiritual cultural claim on her. She owes them for raising her.
And when those specific blood relatives happen to be present in the room during the experiment, the panic set in.
Precisely. They knew that if their parents or siblings saw them win a stack of shillings, the emotional and cultural demands for transfers, gifts, and loans would be inescapable. It's a guilt trip backed by centuries of tradition.
Because she knows they don't see her every day. So if they see her with money right now, they are going to pounce.
Yep.
Okay, so we've seen the raw behavior. We know they're terrified. We know exactly who they're terrified of. But can we put a concrete economic number on this invisible extortion? How much is this fear actually costing them in a quantifiable way?
Yes, we can. And this is where the economists really flexed their analytical muscles. They didn't just look at the raw choices and say, wow, people hide money.
They wanted to calculate the exact invisible tax rate.
So they built a highly complex structural economic model.
The paper called it a mixed logic maximum likelihood model. I read that phrase and my eyes completely glazed over. I am begging you, for my sake and the listener's sake, explain how that actually works in plain English. How do you reverse engineer fear into a math equation?
Fair enough. Let's strip away the academic jargon. Think of it like this. The researchers watched how much potential profit these women were willingly throwing away just to stay hidden.
Okay.
If a woman is willing to throw away 50 shillings of expected profit to avoid being seen, that tells us she believes that being seen will cost her more than 50 shillings.
Okay, I'm tracking. If I pay a $20 parking ticket to avoid getting my car towed, it's because getting towed costs more than $20.
Exactly. By analyzing thousands of these choices, weighing the potential upside of the risky cup against the desperate urge to pretend they only had 80 shillings, the statistical model essentially triangulated the tax rate the women felt they were facing.
It calculated the exact percentage of their wealth they expected to be confiscated by their relatives if their wealth became public knowledge.
And the number the model spit out is devastating. Overall, the baseline showed that women acted as if any visible money they made would be taxed by their community at a rate of roughly 4%.
Okay, 4%.
But when their relatives were literally in the room staring them in the face across the classroom, that effective tax rate doubled. It spiked to 8%.
Now, I know what some listeners might be thinking. 8%. That's nothing. I pay 25, 30% in income tax to my government. 8% sounds like a paradise.
Right, but we have to fundamentally understand how this informal kin tax works, because it is entirely different from a government tax.
It's not on profit, is it?
No. This isn't an 8% tax on your net profit after you deduct your business expenses. This is an 8% tax on your gross revenue. It is a visible wealth tax.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to make the sheer brutality of this clear. Imagine you open a lemonade stand on your street corner. You want to make some extra cash.
A classic example.
You go to the store, you spend $90 buying lemons, sugar, ice, and cups. You stand out in the hot sun all day, dealing with customers, doing the hard work.
Right.
At the end of the day, you count the cash in your box and you have $100. That $100 is your gross revenue.
It's what everyone walking by can see in your hand.
Now, if your uncle walks by and sees that $100 under this kin tax system, he doesn't ask for a spreadsheet of your expenses. He just looks at the visible cash, reaches in, and takes 8%. He takes $8.
And where the math becomes structurally destructive is when you sit down at your kitchen table later and calculate your actual profit.
Exactly. Let's do the math. Your revenue was $100, but your ingredients cost you $90. So your actual real-world profit for the whole grueling day of work was only $10.
Yeah.
But your uncle didn't tax your $10 profit. He taxed the visible $100 revenue. He took $8. He just confiscated 80% of your actual take-home profit.
Brutal.
You worked all day in the sun for $2. No wonder you'd rather pretend you didn't sell any lemonade at all. You'd rather pack up the stand and hide it in the garage.
That analogy perfectly isolates the exact mechanism of poverty we are talking about. When a community taxes revenue rather than profit, it makes low-margin businesses mathematically impossible to run.
And we have to remember, most businesses started by poor entrepreneurs in developing nations are incredibly low margin.
Selling tomatoes at a roadside stall, buying cheap fabric to sew clothes, trading small volumes of grain.
The margins are razor thin to begin with.
Exactly. If your margin is 10% and your family taxes your visible revenue at 8%, you have no business left.
You're working for free.
If you know your tiny profit will be entirely wiped out by familial obligations the moment you show any signs of success, the most rational, logical economic decision you can make is to never start the business in the first place. Sit in the shade. Do nothing.
Which transitions us into the macro impact. Because if one woman hiding her lemonade stand is a personal tragedy, what happens when a whole village of women does
A
it?
whole system stalls.
What happens when hundreds of people are individually making the rational choice to do nothing? We are looking at a macro disaster. This dynamic isn't just a quirky behavioral psychology finding, it is the serial killer of entire economies.
To understand that macro impact, the researchers zoomed out. They took their eyes off the individual plastic cups in the classroom and looked at the real-world economic indicators of those 26 distinct villages.
They wanted to see if the psychological tendency to hide money in the game correlated with actual physical poverty outside the classroom.
And the data paints a grim, undeniable picture. It's almost haunting how perfectly it aligns.
What did they find?
In the villages where people exhibited higher tendencies to hide money during the experiment, the places where that social pressure, that kin tax, was the thickest and most oppressive, the real-world economic indicators were terrible.
It was consistent across the board. In those high-hiding villages, households had measurably fewer durable assets.
They had fewer tin roofs, fewer bicycles, fewer radios.
There were significantly lower rates of formal or skilled employment, and perhaps most tellingly, even agricultural practices suffered. There's a noticeably lower use of fertilizer on their crops.
Wait, fertilizer, let's unpack that. How does the psychological fear of hiding money affect whether or not someone puts fertilizer on their corn?
Think about what fertilizer actually is in a farming community. It's not just plant food. It is a highly visible investment in future wealth.
Oh, I see.
If you buy fertilizer, your neighbors see you carrying the heavy bags from the market. A few weeks later, they see your crops growing taller and greener than everyone else's.
It is a massive, glowing neon sign to the entire village that says, I am going to have a huge surplus harvest this year.
Oh my God, it's a beacon.
It is. If you are terrified of the kin tax, if you know that a surplus harvest just means your relatives will show up with empty sacks demanding their share, you don't buy the fertilizer.
You intentionally keep your yield low.
You keep your crops looking stunted and inconspicuous, just like everyone else's, so you blend in.
That is profoundly depressing. They are literally deliberately choosing to stunt their own food supply. They are choosing to stay poor collectively rather than succeed individually and be drained by their relatives.
It is a poverty trap constructed entirely out of social expectations. And to show just how deep the trap goes, the researchers ran a computer simulation.
I love when they do this.
They took their calculated 8% kin tax and fed it into a macroeconomic model of a village economy. They wanted to see how this tax alters entrepreneurial choices over the long term.
Like, if women have a chance to start a business, how does the fear of family demands change the trajectory of the village?
The numbers from this simulation are the ones that really slap me in the face.
Yeah.
They assumed a standard return on business investment. If the return on a business isn't astronomically high, which, let's be real, most real-world businesses are just grinding out a modest living, this 8% invisible family tax causes the number of women willing to start businesses to drop from 64% down to just 40%.
A massive chunk of the entrepreneurial class just vanishes before they even begin.
And it gets worse. Overall investment volume in the village plummets by more than 27%.
More than a quarter of the entire economic engine of the community is just turned off, unplugged.
Because the effort simply isn't worth the extortion, it creates a silent depression. No factories are burning down, no stock markets are crashing on the evening news, but wealth is being annihilated in the shadows before it can even be created.
It's invisible destruction.
And this raises what is perhaps the most important question in modern development economics. How much global poverty isn't caused by a lack of capital or a lack of education or bad geography, but by a deeply ingrained social structure that actively punishes capital creation?
We spend billions of dollars every year sending foreign aid, grants, and microloans to developing nations. We assume the problem is simply that they don't have enough money to get started.
But if the social bucket has a massive hole in the bottom, if the kin tax is actively deterring people from investing that microloan because they know their cousins will take the profits, then just pouring more capital into the bucket won't solve the root issue.
You are just funding the extortion network.
Exactly.
Which brings us to our conclusion, the final takeaway. Because as we wrap up this deep dive, we absolutely must bring this home to you, the listener.
It's so relevant to everyone.
If you are sitting in a high-rise apartment in London or driving your car in Los Angeles, it is very easy to listen to this and think, wow, what a fascinating problem they have over there in rural Kenya. But this isn't just a Kenya problem.
Not at all. The researchers in the paper explicitly connect this phenomenon to other cultures and eras.
Yeah.
They point to anthropologists like Clifford Geertz, who documented the exact same wealth-hiding behavior and family extortion in post-independence Indonesia.
And it happens in the West, too.
Oh, absolutely. They point to sociologist Carol Stack, who documented the existence of highly analogous kin obligations and resource-draining networks in poor urban communities right here in the United States.
It's what the researchers officially title the rotten kinship theorem, which is a phenomenal name for an economic theory.
It really is. It dictates that any system, anywhere in the world, where blood ties morph into a coercive, inescapable extortion racket, will inevitably stifle economic growth.
The punishing mechanism of wealth hasn't disappeared from the modern world. It just wears modern clothes. The underlying psychology is exactly the same.
Think about the modern parallels. Think about young people today, born into poverty or struggling working-class families, who manage to get a college education, break the cycle, and move to a big city to build a professional life.
Oh, absolutely. This happens all the time. They get that first corporate job, they post an update on LinkedIn, and suddenly the calls start coming in.
A sibling needs rent money because they lost their job. A parent needs a sudden car repair. An aunt needs help with medical bills.
The origin family views the successful child not as an individual trying to build a foundation, but as a communal ATM.
Exactly. And the emotional manipulation is intense. If that young professional tries to set boundaries, if they say no, the social sanctions are brutal.
The guilt trips. The accusations of forgetting where you came from or thinking you're better than us now.
They are experiencing a modernized digital version of the exact same pressure those women in the Kenyan classroom felt.
They are trying to build wealth, trying to invest in their own future, maybe save for a down payment on a house or put money in a retirement account, while being completely, systematically drained by the financial demands of their origin families.
And often, just like the women in the experiment, they adapt by hiding. They start hiding their success.
They downplay their promotions. They complain about how expensive city life is to pretend they are broke.
They might even intentionally sabotage their own careers or avoid taking lucrative risks because the subconscious stress of being the family bank is too high.
It's the exact same dynamic. So we started this deep dive by asking a really uncomfortable anti-common sense question: why does hard work not always equal wealth?
And we found the answer hidden inside a plastic cup in a rural Kenyan classroom.
We found that when the social cost of success is too high, human beings will rationally, mathematically, choose to stunt their own growth. We will choose the safety of the herd, even if the herd is starving, over the danger of standing out and being consumed.
It is a profound, somewhat dark realization about human nature. We are highly social creatures, and that is usually our greatest strength.
Right.
But that social wiring can be short-circuited by poverty. When mutual aid stops being voluntary and starts being mandatory, it ceases to be a safety net. It becomes a cage.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, something to chew on long after you take off your headphones. Think about your own life.
We all exist in complex social networks. Families, corporate cultures, friend groups, neighborhoods.
If our closest relationships can act as the strongest chains holding us down in a developing village, what invisible kin taxes are you paying right now in your own life? What are you sacrificing just to manage the expectations of your community?
And perhaps more importantly, what potential returns, what wild successes are you leaving on the table right now just to avoid being seen?
Are you hiding your own 80 shillings? This has been a deep dive into the hidden forces shaping our world. Stay curious, question the obvious, and we'll catch you next time.